If this is some kind of scam, you'll regret it. No one touches my son without consequences. That was the first thing he said to her. Not, what happened? Not, is he okay? Not even, where are you? Just cold suspicion. Straight up threat. But Amara Davis didn't hang up. She held the phone close to her cheek, shielding it from the pouring rain. Her apron was soaked, her curly black hair clung to her forehead. But her voice was steady. Sir, I don't want your money. I don't even know who you are. But your son is unconscious, and he needs help. Right now. There was silence on the other end. A long one. She looked down again. The boy's lips were pale, maybe 9-10 years old. He hadn't moved since he collapsed. His backpack was ripped, shoes soaked, breathing shallow. She found him like that. Right outside the cafe. A luxury coffee bar in Tribeca where people came to be seen, not to care. He'd stumbled in the rain, grabbed the handle to the door, and crumpled. Nobody else moved. A man in a $1,000 suit scoffed. A woman whispered, probably a runaway. Even her manager said, don't get involved, Amara, that's not our business. But she made it her business. Because when you're black and grew up in the Bronx, you don't wait for someone else to help. You become the help. She checked for a pulse. Weak, barely there. Checked his pockets, found a small laminated card. Ethan Caldwell, emergency contact. Stephen Caldwell. That name didn't mean anything to her at the time, but she made the call. And now here she was kneeling on a wet New York sidewalk, holding a stranger's child, while his billionaire father threatened her over the phone. But Amara? She didn't flinch. Not when the headlights lit up the block 5 minutes later. Not when 3 black SUVs pulled up like something out of a movie. Not even when the doors flew open and a team of men in black suits flooded the sidewalk. Then he stepped out. Stephen Caldwell, CEO of the fastest-growing aerospace tech firm in the country. Worth over $11 billion. And colder than the rain falling around them. He didn't rush, he studied. His eyes scanned the scene like a contract. First the boy. Then the girl holding him. The black waitress. Her soaked apron, her dark skin, her calm eyes. You could see it, he didn't know whether to say thank you or call security. But then, Ethan's fingers twitched. A tiny broken whisper came from his mouth. She helped me. That cracked something. And just like that, everything started to change. This isn't just about a child collapsing. Or a CEO caught off guard. This is a black story that ripped through power, perception, and prejudice. And here at Hidden Worth, we tell the stories that society tries to overlook. So don't scroll away. Because what Amara did next, it didn't just save a life. It started a war with silence, with status, and with what it really means to care. Her name was Amara Davis. She wasn't famous. She wasn't powerful. But she was the kind of person this world depends on far more than it realizes. She was 24, born and raised in the Bronx. Life never handed her much. Her father left when she was a toddler. Her mother, a nurse's assistant, worked herself into illness trying to give Amara a better shot. Amara had brains, graduated high school early, started a nursing program with a partial scholarship. But dreams cost money. And when her mom got sick, she dropped out to take care of her. No hesitation, no regrets, just bills, prayers, and late-night shifts at a boutique cafe in Tribeca. The place wasn't big, but it was posh. Wall art priced higher than her monthly rent. Customers walked in like they owned the block suits, heels, jewelry, and inherited arrogance. And her job? Smile, serve, vanish. She got used to people calling her sweetie, you people, or pretending not to see her at all. She got used to the way security guards followed her in stores, or how taxi drivers skipped her on rainy nights. That's just how things were. But Amara? She never let bitterness root itself. She held grace like a shield. Smiled like she still believed people could be good. She wasn't trying to change the world. She was just trying to get through the week. Quiet, honest, unshakable. And that's what made her dangerous, to a man like Stephen Caldwell. Stephen Caldwell was, by every public metric, a titan. Net worth, $11.4 billion. founder and CEO of Altavax Aerospace, a company that had put more satellites into orbit in the past 5 years than NASA and SpaceX combined. He was cold, brilliant, efficient, a machine wrapped in Armani. He had his own orbit, and everything around him adjusted to match it. Employees feared him, partners admired him, reporters chased his shadow. But fatherhood? That wasn't part of the business model. Stephen loved his son on paper. He provided the best private school, the best doctors, tutors, everything money could touch. But he didn't know his son, not really. He didn't know that Ethan hated the driver who picked him up every day, that he missed his mom, that he liked sketching cities upside down in his notebooks, that he never liked crowded rooms or loud voices. He didn't know that Ethan had been sneaking away, walking the city alone, because it was the only time he felt invisible enough to breathe. So when the call came in that night from a strange number, a strange voice, he reacted the only way he knew how. Not with concern. Not with fatherly instinct. With control. If this is some kind of scam, you'll regret it. That was all he knew. Threats, leverage, contracts. He didn't ask about the rain, or the fact that a complete stranger had stayed on a freezing sidewalk with a child who wasn't hers. He didn't ask who she was. He assumed. And that assumption, that single moment of judgment, is where everything started to shift. Because what he didn't know, and wouldn't understand until much later, was that Amara had already saved his son. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. With nothing but kindness. With nothing but presence. She wasn't trying to be a hero, she just was. And that was the problem. Stephen had spent his entire life believing that value came with credentials, degrees, awards, tax brackets. But here was a black waitress with no title, no connections, no apparent reason to help, doing more for his son in one moment than he had done all year. That's where the real conflict lives. Not in the headlines. Not in the scandal. But in the space between perception and truth. Between the man who thought money could buy safety, and the woman who proved humanity still exists. This is where the world began to watch. Where Stephen Caldwell, king of silence and strategy, would have to decide whether to stay safe in suspicion, or step into a truth too raw to control. And Amara? She didn't want the spotlight. She only wanted what was right. But when grace is this disruptive, you can't keep it quiet for long. He remembered the silence first. That kind of thick, expensive silence only a massive house could produce. Marble floors, tall ceilings, glass windows that didn't open, everything polished, everything cold. Even the light felt filtered, like it passed through a layer of caution before reaching his skin. Ethan Caldwell was 10 years old, quiet, sharp-eyed, always thinking, rarely speaking. Because in the Caldwell household, speaking had rules, timing, tone, and mostly, limits. His father, Stephen Caldwell, was a man of routine. He left before sunrise, returned after dark. Dinner, if it happened at all, was taken in separate rooms. Sometimes they'd pass in the hallway. Sometimes not. Ethan had once counted how many full sentences they shared in a week. 4. On a good one. Stephen wasn't cruel. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. He just wasn't there, not really. When he was present, it was like standing next to a hurricane's eye, calm, controlled, and always one step away from blowing everything apart. But Ethan craved connection, not gadgets, not custom-made sneakers, not the latest drone set delivered in sterile brown boxes. He missed being seen. His mother, Hannah, had been the opposite. She used to leave post-it notes in his lunchbox, little hearts, smiley faces, jokes he never quite understood, but kept anyway. She sang in the kitchen, not well, but loud, off-key and free. She used to dance with him while pasta boiled, spin him in circles until he giggled so hard he fell. She told him stories at night, big ones, the kind that made bedtime feel like stepping through a secret door. Dragons, time travel, space whales. Anything his little mind could imagine, she matched it. And then, she left. No note, no explanation. Just packed 2 suitcases, kissed him on the forehead, and walked out the door on a Tuesday morning. He didn't cry, not then. He just stood by the front window for 3 hours, watching every black car that passed by, hoping one would stop. One never did. After that, things changed. His father became even busier. His school grades slipped. Tutors came and went. Therapists too. But no one stayed. No one really asked how he was, just whether he was adjusting. Adjusting to what? To being half forgotten? To living in a house where birthday cakes came from personal chefs who didn't know his favorite flavor? He started wandering. Small at first, just down the block, past the guards, to the bookstore on West End. Then longer walks, further, disguised as errands but really, escapes. No one stopped him. No one tracked him. His father's world ran on spreadsheets, not gut instinct. So he kept going. And one rainy evening, that's how he ended up outside a cafe in Tribeca. Cold, wet, dizzy, the world spinning faster than his feet could catch up. He remembered the sidewalk tilting, the buzzing in his ears, the moment his knees gave out. And then warmth. Not a blanket, not a coat, arms. Soft, steady arms, someone holding him, not rushing, not panicking, just there. That was Amara. She didn't ask for a name, didn't back away. She just held on, shielded his face from the rain, whispered, "You're okay. I've got you." And for the first time in months, Ethan believed it. Later, at the hospital, after all the noise and flashing lights and confusion, he opened his eyes. Everything felt distant, like he was underwater. But he saw her, sitting beside his bed, curled in a hospital chair, eyes tired but still alert, her apron still damp, hair frizzed from the rain. And yet, she smiled. "Hey, you're safe. Your dad's on his way." He nodded and said the only thing that mattered. "You stayed." She blinked, then nodded back. That's all it took. No lecture, no big speech, just presence. Ethan didn't tell his dad this part. He didn't explain how the stranger in the rain made him feel more seen than the man who shared his DNA. He didn't say that kindness can't be measured in dollars. That sometimes, it lives in sidewalk moments and warm voices. But he'd remember it. For the rest of his life. And deep down, Stephen Caldwell would remember it too. Even if he couldn't admit it. By the next morning, it wasn't just a story. It was the story. Billionaire CEO's son collapses in the arms of a mystery waitress. That was the first headline. But it was the kindest one. Others weren't so generous. Bronx waitress claims to rescue CEO's son, family remains silent. Black girl, white air, coincidence or con? Ambition in aprons, was it all a setup? Social media exploded. Clips from the cafe's security cameras leaked by someone in the building started making rounds. In grainy black and white footage, Amara could be seen cradling Ethan, shielding him from the rain, then checking his pockets. That 30-second clip was enough. People paused, zoomed, speculated. She was going through his stuff. Where's the proof she didn't stage it? Look at how calm she is. Too calm. This is classic social climbing. None of them knew her. None of them were there. But in the court of public opinion, the facts never had a fighting chance. It only got worse when someone dug up an old photo of Amara protesting outside a local hospital years ago, holding a handmade sign that read, "Care shouldn't cost everything." It was a peaceful rally about rising healthcare costs. But online, it was framed differently. Political activist disguises as waitress. Black Lives Matter ties. Dangerous motives beneath a gentle face. Some of the worst headlines didn't even come from tabloids. They came from people, regular people posting, reposting, twisting the narrative for clicks and likes. And that's when the floodgates opened. Strangers started messaging the cafe. One-star reviews poured in. Amara was called everything from gold digger to opportunist to street rat. The cafe's manager, spineless and scared of scandal, asked her not to return until things cooled down. But things weren't cooling. They were catching fire. Meanwhile, Stephen Caldwell said nothing. No statement, no press conference, no tweet. The man with enough power to launch rockets into space couldn't or wouldn't defend the woman who had saved his son. Maybe it was legal advice. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was habit, the kind of silence men like him were trained to use when things got messy. Whatever the reason, it sent a message. And people ran with it. Reporters camped outside Amara's apartment. Drones buzzed her windows. Journalists knocked on doors, waved microphones in neighbors' faces, asked questions she didn't have the strength to answer. Were you targeting the boy? Have you had contact with the Caldwell family since? Do you regret getting involved? What kind of question was that? Did she regret caring? One night, she stood outside her building, hoodie pulled low, trying to grab groceries from a delivery guy too nervous to get out of his car. He slid the bags across the seat. Said, "I don't want trouble." She nodded, took them, whispered thank you. And that's when she saw it. Across the street, someone had tagged her building with spray paint. "Not your son." 3 words, in red. Big, loud, cruel. She stared at it for a long time. Not angry, not shocked, just tired. Because in that moment, she realized something. This wasn't about what she did. It was about who she was. A black girl from the Bronx, in the wrong part of town, touching the wrong boy, connected to the wrong man. It wasn't her actions they hated. It was her presence in the narrative at all. But there was one voice that cut through the noise. Ethan. In a video taken at school, one he didn't know would go viral, he was seen talking to a classmate who said something cruel about Amara. And clear as day, you could hear him say, "She didn't ask for anything. She stayed with me. She was the only one who did." That clip reached 10 million views in 2 days. Number "She Stayed" started trending. A hashtag, a movement, a counterpunch to the venom. People started looking again. Looking harder. Looking differently. And while the storm hadn't passed, a shift had started. Because the truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, it waits. And sometimes, it survives long enough to be heard. He hadn't meant to go. Not really. Stephen Caldwell didn't do drop-ins. He didn't show up unannounced. He sent people, assistants, drivers, lawyers. He solved problems with wires and wires of money, with bulletproof PR, with carefully controlled public statements that read like soft steel. But this was different. This wasn't about the company. This wasn't about damage control. This was about something he couldn't buy or spin. This was about her. It started with a knock on his door. Ethan stood there, in pajamas, holding his tablet. The video was paused on the screen, grainy footage of Amara kneeling in the rain, shielding Ethan with her own body. "She didn't run," Ethan said. "They're lying about her." Stephen stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't say much, just nodded, rubbed his jaw, and said he'd handle it. But he didn't call anyone. He didn't fire a press release. He got in his car, alone. And for the first time in a very long time, he drove without a destination. Amara lived in the Bronx, a small walk-up building that looked like it had stories in its walls. He found it easily. His team had given him the address weeks ago. He just hadn't used it until now. He stood outside her building, wearing a black coat and sunglasses like he was hiding from his own decisions. A few people walked past and didn't even glance at him. That was new. He climbed the steps, slowly, like he wasn't sure what he'd say once he got there. And then he knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He was about to leave when the door cracked open, and there she was. Amara. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes were tired. Her voice flat. "You shouldn't be here." He didn't argue. Didn't ask to come in. Didn't offer a check or a lawyer's card. He just said, "You stayed." She blinked, caught off guard, but not softened. "Yeah, I stayed. And I lost my job. Got doxxed. Was called a thief, a liar, and worse, all because I didn't walk away from a kid in the rain." He nodded slowly. Took it. Didn't deflect. "I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. I was afraid if I spoke, I'd make things worse." She crossed her arms. "You mean, worse for you?" Ouch. But she was right. And for once, Stephen didn't have a comeback. He let the silence breathe between them. Then, he pulled something from his coat. A letter, handwritten. This was supposed to be a statement, something my PR team could polish. But I realized, if I can't say it to you first, it's not worth saying. She took the envelope, hesitantly. Didn't open it. Just stared at him. You're not used to hearing no, are you? I'm not used to needing forgiveness. And I'm not used to being the one who's owed it. Another pause. Then he said something that didn't sound like him at all. I'm sorry. Not polished, not rehearsed, just raw. Not just for what happened, but for assuming things about you, for letting silence speak when I should have spoken, for not showing up sooner. She leaned against the doorframe, exhaled slowly. You know what the worst part was? He shook his head. I didn't want your money. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted someone to say, that was the right thing to do. But instead, I got hate mail. His shoulders dropped. For a second, the billionaire armor cracked. He looked older, smaller. You saved my son, and I couldn't even save your name. There was a long moment of stillness. Then, softly, Amara asked, why now? He didn't have a perfect answer. Because my son sees you as a hero, and I don't want him growing up thinking I was too proud to admit he was right. She nodded. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but something closer to pause. I'm not the story, Mr. Caldwell, your son Island. Then let me help tell it right. That was the beginning. Not of love, not yet. Not even of trust, but of something that might one day grow into both. Because showing up, really showing up, means more than press releases. It means knocking on a door you once ignored, and hoping it opens anyway. Before the money, before the boardrooms, before the suits, the headlines, the private jets. Stephen Caldwell was just a scared husband in a hospital hallway, gripping a vending machine Diet Coke like it could stop time. The floors smelled like bleach. The lights buzzed. A nurse walked by without looking at him. He had been waiting for 3 hours, pacing, checking his phone every 90 seconds. His wife, Hannah, had collapsed that morning out of nowhere. 1 minute, she was at the breakfast table, laughing at something Ethan had said. The next, she was on the floor, clutching her head, her speech slurring into a language no one understood. Stephen had been on a conference call in Tokyo. He almost didn't pick up when the nanny called. When he got to the hospital, she was already unconscious. Aneurysm, sudden, aggressive. There was a 12% survival rate, the doctor said. That number haunted him. Not 10, not 15, just enough to offer hope, just enough to stretch the pain. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. He could negotiate billion-dollar contracts. He could launch satellites into space. He could outthink senators and CEOs. But none of that mattered in a hospital hallway. He remembered the doctor walking out, expression unreadable. He remembered the way the walls felt like they were closing in. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. Just like that, she was gone. Not in slow motion, not in dramatic movie music. Just gone. After the funeral, Stephen went back to work. He wore a black tie for a month. Then he didn't. He didn't cry. He didn't talk about it. He didn't even tell Ethan the full truth, just said, Mommy went to sleep. Grief turned into efficiency. He tripled his work hours, cut all personal interviews. He automated holidays, gifts delivered by assistants, emails scheduled a year in advance. He became the version of himself that couldn't be broken again. Cold, calculated, unreachable. Because if he let himself feel, it might never stop. But deep inside, it festered. Not just the pain of losing her. The guilt. Because he'd missed it. The warning signs, the moments, the slurred words 2 weeks prior that he brushed off as fatigue. The time she begged him to slow down, to take a trip, to be present. He always said, later. Later never came. So he stopped making promises. Stopped hoping. Stopped believing that being close to someone was anything but a risk. He loved Ethan, but from a distance. He showed it with money, with structure, with plans. Never words, never time. Because getting too close? That's how you get shattered. Still, he kept a photo of Hannah in his desk drawer. Not framed, just tucked beneath contracts and legal documents. A small, wrinkled print from a beach trip they took before Ethan was born. She was laughing in it. He hadn't heard that laugh in years. Some nights, when the house was too quiet and Ethan was asleep, He'd pour a glass of whiskey, take out that photo, and whisper things into the darkness. Things like, "I'm sorry I didn't answer sooner. You were right, I work too much." He's growing up, looks like you when he smiles. You would have liked her, Amara. The last one surprised even him. He'd said it just days after seeing Amara hold Ethan on that hospital bed. He didn't know her, not really. But in that moment, he saw something familiar, something Hannah used to carry. Kindness that didn't ask for anything back. And it scared the hell out of him. Because loving someone like that again? It meant becoming vulnerable, human. It meant peeling back all the layers he'd built around his heart since the day Hannah died. Layers made of fear, of guilt, of the belief that care is weakness. So when he stood on Amara's doorstep, letter in hand, apology on his lips, he wasn't just facing her. He was facing a version of himself he thought had died with his wife. A version that believed in second chances. In people. In the kind of love that doesn't need to be earned, just returned. That night, after leaving Amara's place, Stephen didn't go back to the office. He didn't check his stocks, didn't answer emails. He drove to the hospital where Hannah had passed. Sat in the parking lot. Just Saturday. No words, no phone. Just memory. And for the first time in over a decade, Stephen Caldwell cried. Not because he was weak, but because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't numb anymore. The invitation came in a black envelope with gold trim. It looked like something from a movie, heavy, official, the kind of thing you needed gloves to open. It was addressed by hand. Just her name, Amara Davis. No titles, no formalities. Inside was a single card. You are cordially invited to the Caldwell Foundation Winter Gala. Formal attire, December 14th. The Glass House, Manhattan. She read it 3 times. Then once more, just to make sure it wasn't a mistake. But it wasn't. The invite was real. The handwriting was real. And the tiny handwritten note at the bottom? That was real too. Ethan asked if you would be there. So did I. Stephen. At first, she didn't want to go. What would she wear? What would she say? Would anyone even want her there, or would she be the object of every stare, every whispered conversation? It didn't matter that she saved a child. To most of those people, she'd still be the black waitress who got too close. But then her neighbor, Miss Loretta, who lived 2 doors down and had been watching the news like it was a second job, told her something that stuck. Honey, sometimes God don't open the door so you can walk in. He opens it so the room can finally see who's been knocking this whole time. So she went. Not for Stephen, not even for Ethan. She went because for once, the story was being told in her voice. And she wasn't about to let anyone rewrite it. The glass house was all chrome and glass and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. Chandeliers that didn't sparkle, they glared. Waiters in gloves, security in tuxedos. Everyone wore black and silver. Names she'd only seen in Forbes or on billboards floated around the room like ghosts with champagne flutes. And then there was her, Amara. In a simple deep green dress she borrowed from a church friend. Hair natural, pulled to the side. No designer labels, no diamonds, just quiet grace. She felt every eye in the room. Some smiled politely. Others didn't bother. She walked slowly, head high, heart pounding. Then she saw him. Stephen. Standing by the fireplace, surrounded by board members and donors. He looked different, somehow, less polished, more present. When he saw her, he didn't wave. He didn't gesture. He walked. Right through the crowd. Straight to her. You came. You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd say yes. I wasn't sure I should. They stood there for a beat. The music hummed in the background. Glasses clinked. But around them, it felt quiet. Then Ethan ran up, wrapped his arms around her waist. You look awesome. She smiled wide, her first real smile in days. The night went on, but the tension didn't disappear. As she moved through the room, conversations paused when she passed. People asked thin questions with thick intentions. How do you know Mr. Caldwell again? Are you involved with the foundation now? Did you ever consider going into media? You've got that viral thing going. she answered with poise. But inside, it was exhausting. It wasn't just racism. It wasn't just classism. It was proximity. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that dress, not in that space, not in the same air as old money and cold legacy. But still she stayed. At dinner, Stephen stood to speak. He thanked the donors, the guests, the partners. Then he paused. But tonight isn't just about funding programs or reaching goals. It's about the power of presence. The kind of presence that shows up not for profit, not for praise, but for people. He looked directly at Amara. Someone in this room saved my son's life. She didn't wear a badge. She didn't have a title. She just cared. When the world walked by, she knelt. There was a hush. Then, he raised his glass. To Amara Davis. Slowly, almost reluctantly at first, others joined in. But by the time she looked up, half the room was standing. Some out of guilt, some out of pressure. But a few because they finally saw what was always there. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just nodded, smiled, and let herself be seen. Not as a waitress. Not as a charity case. As a woman who changed a life and refused to apologize for it. The applause at the gala eventually died down. The orchestra played softer. The waiters poured more wine. The chatter of Manhattan's elite picked up again, but the moment lingered in the air like smoke. Amara sat at her table, unsure what to do with her hands. She wasn't used to attention. Not this kind. Not hundreds of people looking at her like she had walked out of a headline and straight into their world. Some clapped politely, others still whispered, and a few stared like she didn't belong. But then she noticed something. Stephen Caldwell wasn't smiling. Not the polished, camera-ready smile he wore for investors. This was different. He looked almost nervous. Later that evening, after the dinner plates were cleared and the speeches ended, Stephen walked back to the stage. No one expected a second address. The MC tried to stop him, but he waved her off. He didn't hold notes. No teleprompter scrolled behind him. It was just Stephen, a microphone, and the weight of silence. He cleared his throat. I wasn't planning on speaking again tonight, but if I leave this room without saying this, I'll regret it. The crowd shifted. Phones rose discreetly. The press at the back leaned forward. Stephen's eyes searched the room until they landed on Amara. She froze, the green dress feeling suddenly too small for the space. For weeks, there's been a story running in the press. A story about a woman, a waitress who stayed with my son when no one else did. You've all seen it. You've all heard the versions. Some of them true. Many of them not. He paused. The silence deepened. I want to tell you the truth. The truth is, I failed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I failed to protect my son that night. I failed to speak up when lies were being written about the woman who saved him. I failed to do what any father, and frankly any decent man, should have done. I let silence speak for me. And silence is a dangerous thing. He exhaled. It wasn't easy for him, Amara could see it. Every word cost him. When Amara called me that night, I didn't thank her. I didn't even ask if my son was breathing. I accused her. I assumed the worst. Not because of who she was, but because of who I had become. A man so used to betrayal that he couldn't recognize grace when it was standing right in front of him. The room was still now. Even the servers stopped moving. Amara Davis is not a scam artist. She is not an opportunist. She is not the caricature that headlines tried to paint. She is a human being who showed more courage, more compassion, and more presence in one moment than I have in years. And if you're looking for a story tonight, that's it. That's the only one that matters. He set the microphone down, but then picked it back up. His voice was quieter this time. I'm sorry, Amara. Not just for the way I treated you, but for making you carry the weight of my silence. I can't take back the headlines. I can't erase the whispers. But I can stand here, in front of the same world that doubted you, and say, I was wrong, and you were right. The room erupted, not in applause, not yet. First came the stillness. The stunned pause of people who had never seen Stephen Caldwell speak like that. Vulnerable. Exposed. Then, the clapping started. Slowly at first. Then stronger. Then louder. Until the whole hall was filled with it. Amara didn't cry. She didn't stand. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, heart beating fast, trying to absorb the weight of it all. For the first time, the narrative wasn't being stolen, it was being returned. Stephen stepped down from the stage. He didn't look at the press, or the donors, or the cameras. He walked straight to her table. He stopped just beside her. No microphone, no spotlight, just his voice, low enough for only her to hear. Thank you for staying that night. Thank you for staying even after I made it harder than it needed to be. She looked up at him, eyes steady. You're right about one thing. Silence is dangerous. Then I'll make sure mine never hurts you again. For the first time since they'd met, she believed him. Not because he was Stephen Caldwell, billionaire CEO, but because, in that moment, he was simply a man admitting he had been wrong. And that was worth more than any fortune. For weeks, she had been silent. Not because she didn't have words, she had plenty. Not because she didn't have feelings, she had too many. But because no matter what she said, someone else twisted it. Turned her into a headline, a meme, a cautionary tale. And now, after the gala, when Stephen's words had finally cracked the wall of lies, people wanted to hear from her. For real this time. Not as a soundbite. Not as the waitress in green, but as Amara Davis. It started with a small podcast. Local. Independent. 2 hosts sitting in a borrowed studio above a laundromat. No glamour. No spotlight. Amara said yes because it felt safe. Human. Honest. She sat in a folding chair, headphones too big for her head, microphone close to her lips. The red light blinked on. The host cleared his throat. Amara, you've been at the center of a storm. Tonight, we'd like to give you the space to tell it in your own words. No interruptions, no edits, just you. What happened that night? Amara took a breath, her fingers twisted in her lap. Then she spoke. I was working a late shift. It was raining so hard the lights flickered. The cafe was empty, except for a few regulars who came in to wait out the storm. Around midnight, I saw a boy outside. He looked small, lost. Before I could even open the door, he collapsed. I ran out. I didn't think. I didn't check with my manager. I just went. He was unconscious, breathing shallow. I checked his pulse. I checked his pockets. That's when I found the emergency card. I called the number. His father answered. You've heard that part. You've heard the tone. What you haven't heard is this. When I looked at that boy lying on the ground, I wasn't thinking about who he belonged to. I wasn't thinking about money, or class, or race. I was thinking about my mom. About the time she collapsed from exhaustion when I was younger. About how scared I was, and how I wished anyone would care enough to stop. Her voice wavered. She let it. That's why I stayed. Not because I wanted something, but because I know what it feels like to be left on the ground, waiting for help that doesn't come. The room was quiet except for the hum of the recording equipment. She went on. The days after, that's when it hurt. Not the night itself. That night I knew I had done the right thing. But after, when strangers called me a thief. When reporters shoved microphones in my face asking if I staged it. When people online said, she doesn't belong near him. Look at her skin. Look at her job. Look at her zip code. That's when it cut deep. I was raised to believe good deeds speak for themselves. That truth rises eventually. But the truth doesn't always trend. Lies do. Hate does. And I carried that weight on top of everything else I already carry: rent, groceries, 2 jobs, a sick mother at home. She leaned closer to the mic. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to be a person who did the right thing. But if being a symbol means other people see that compassion doesn't have a color, then maybe that's worth it. The host whispered, take your time. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and finished. To anyone listening, I want to say this. You don't need billions to save somebody. You don't need power to show up. Sometimes all you need is 2 hands, 1 steady voice, and the courage to stay when others walk away. That's what I did. That's what anyone can do. So the next time you see someone hurting, don't wait for the perfect moment, or the perfect words, or the perfect person to step in. You might be the only one who does. And that might be enough. When the episode went live, no one expected what came next. The clip of her voice saying, "Compassion doesn't have a color," spread like wildfire. Shared on Twitter, stitched on TikTok, reposted on Instagram. It wasn't polished, it wasn't corporate, it was just her. Raw, human, true. And for the first time, Amara's story wasn't being told about her. It was being told by her. When Amara's voice hit the airwaves, it didn't just echo, it roared. At first, it was a ripple. A handful of shares, a few comments, saying, "Finally, she spoke." But ripples have a way of turning into waves, and within 24 hours, her words were everywhere. Clips of her podcast interview flooded social media. Her line, "Compassion doesn't have a color," trended on Twitter. TikTok teens made edits of her holding Ethan against the backdrop of rain. On Instagram, artists drew portraits of her, haloed in light, calling her the girl who stayed. For the first time, the story was shifting. But support wasn't just digital. On a chilly Saturday morning, Amara walked outside her Bronx building to find a line of neighbors waiting with coffee, bagels, and posters. They weren't reporters. They weren't paparazzi. They were people she'd grown up with, people who had watched her carry groceries for her mother, walk to night classes, work long shifts, and still smile. They held signs that read, "She stayed. We believe Amara. Compassion is greater than status." A local church choir sang on the sidewalk, their voices rising above the traffic. Kids chalked her name in bright colors across the pavement. For once, the graffiti on her block wasn't an insult. It was a mural. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, things were different. At the same gala halls and boardrooms where whispers about her once spread like wildfire, conversations were changing. Donors called Stephen Caldwell's office, not to complain, but to ask how they could meet the young woman who showed what real character looks like. One wealthy couple offered to sponsor her return to nursing school. A clothing designer sent a package with a handwritten note. "You don't need a label, but if you ever want one, this is yours." Not everyone was convinced, of course. Some still muttered about theatrics and publicity. But the tide had turned, and with it came something Amara had not felt in weeks. Breathing space. The national media followed. Morning shows invited her to sit on their couches. News anchors asked her about race, class, and why kindness had become so radical. She declined most of them. She didn't want to be a prop, a segment squeezed between weather and sports. Instead, she chose carefully. A school assembly in Queens, a panel about healthcare equity, a community forum in Harlem. At each event, she spoke softly but firmly. "I didn't save Ethan because of who his father island. I saved him because I knew what it felt like to wait for help and wonder if anyone was coming. No one should have to wonder that." Every time she said it, people clapped. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they stood. And slowly, the narrative shifted from scandal to symbol. But the most powerful moment came not from TV, not from Twitter, not even from the gala. It came from a handwritten letter. A young girl from Detroit mailed it to the cafe where Amara used to work. The manager, awkwardly, passed it along. Inside, the girl had written, "I'm black like you. I'm a waitress like you. People look at me like I'm invisible. But when I saw you, I thought maybe I could be more. Thank you for staying." Amara folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. For the first time, she felt the weight of what her story had become, not just a defense, not just survival. A mirror. A reminder that others were watching. Even Ethan felt it. At school, kids who once teased him now asked questions. Was she really that kind? Did she really sit by your bed all night? And Ethan, shy but clear, told them the truth. She didn't leave, that's all you need to know. The community's reaction didn't erase the hate, but it drowned it out. For every cruel tweet, there were 10 voices of support. For every headline twisting her actions, there was a neighbor, a teacher, a stranger saying, "We see you." And for Amara, that was enough. Because sometimes survival isn't about shouting louder. It's about staying long enough for the world to finally hear the whisper of truth. Just when it seemed like the storm was passing, a new cloud rolled in. His name was Reggie Malone. Tall, sharp-tongued, and bitter enough to sour milk, Reggie had once worked at the same Tribeca cafe as Amara. He didn't last long. He showed up late, mouthed off to customers, and stole tips from the jar. When Amara caught him pocketing extra change, she told the manager. A week later, he was fired. He never forgave her. Now, with Amara's face everywhere on podcasts, in news feeds, even painted on murals, Reggie saw his chance. It started with a live stream. He set up his phone in his apartment, sat on a broken couch, and stared straight into the camera. "Y'all don't know the real Amara Davis," he began, his voice slick with confidence. "Everyone's painting her like some kind of saint. But I worked with her, and let me tell you, she ain't what you think." The comments poured in immediately, viewers hungry for drama. "She staged that whole thing," Reggie continued. "You think it's a coincidence she just happened to find the billionaire's kid? Please. She's been trying to climb her way up since day one. Always cozying up to the right customers, always playing sweet so folks would trust her. And now she's cashing in." He smirked into the camera. She saw an opportunity, and she took it. Don't get fooled. Within hours, the clip hit Twitter, then Facebook, then YouTube. Headlines followed. Former coworker calls Amara a fraud. Was it all a setup? Hero or hustler? The backlash reignited. Hashtags split in two: numbers she stayed versus numbers she played. For Amara, it felt like starting from zero again. The same bile, the same doubt, flooding her doorstep. Neighbors reassured her. Friends defended her. But the poison was spreading fast. Stephen saw it too. He was in a boardroom when the story broke. One of his executives slid a tablet across the table. "You should see this." Stephen watched the clip. Every lie, every twist, every smirk. His jaw tightened. For years, his strategy had been silence. Don't engage. Don't fuel the fire. Let the noise burn out. But this wasn't business. This was personal. And when he saw Ethan sitting at home, scrolling through comments calling Amara a con artist, Stephen knew he couldn't stay silent again. That night, he called Amara. She didn't pick up. Not the first time. Not the second. On the third, she answered. Her voice was low, worn thin. "What do you want, Stephen?" "I saw it." "Then you saw what the world thinks of me again. I saw what a bitter man thinks of you, and I'm not going to let it stand." There was a pause. "Words won't fix this," she whispered. "Then we'll use proof." The next morning, Stephen's legal team filed a defamation suit against Reggie Malone. Not quietly, publicly. The press release was everywhere. But Stephen didn't stop there. He held a press conference. Cameras, reporters, the whole 9 yards. He stepped to the podium, Ethan by his side. And then Ethan did something no one expected. He leaned into the microphone. "Reggie is lying. I was there. I know what happened. Amara stayed with me when nobody else did. She didn't want money. She didn't want fame. She just wanted me to be safe. That's the truth." The room went still. The reporters, hungry for a quote, found themselves silent in front of a 10-year-old boy speaking clearer than any adult in the room. Stephen stepped forward. "My son is right. Reggie Malone is spreading lies to hurt a woman who doesn't deserve it. Amara Davis saved my child. I owe her my son's life, and I will not allow anyone to erase that truth." The clip went viral. This time, it wasn't Amara fighting alone. It was Ethan. It was Stephen. It was the truth spoken from more than one voice. And while Reggie tried to keep his show running, his followers drifted away. Sponsors cut ties. Platforms flagged his content. The same internet that had lifted him up swallowed him whole. Amara watched from her apartment, phone in hand, tears welling not from defeat this time, but from relief. For the first time, she realized something powerful. She wasn't standing alone anymore. The lawsuits faded. The headlines slowed. The noise quieted, at least for a while. But the question remained, what next? For Amara, silence would have been easy. She could have stepped back, returned to school, disappeared from the spotlight. She thought about it more than once. For Stephen, the instinct was to bury it. Pay off lawyers, close the chapter, move forward with business as usual. That was his pattern. But Ethan changed everything. One evening, the boy walked into Stephen's office holding a school project, a hand-drawn poster with construction paper and glue. At the top, In uneven letters, it read, "Everyone deserves someone who stays." Beneath the words were stick figures, one of Ethan, one of Amara, one of his father. Stephen stared at it for a long time, longer than he'd stared at any contract. And for the first time, he asked himself what if Ethan was right. That night, Stephen called Amara. She answered with caution. "What is it now?" "I have an idea, but it only works if it's ours, not mine, ours." Silence, then curiosity. "Go on." "A foundation, not just for Ethan's story, not just for what happened, for kids like him, for people like you, for the ones who get left behind." Amara didn't speak at first. She had heard promises before. She had seen charity used as a mask, a tax write-off, a vanity project. But something in his voice was different. Raw. Steady. "What would we call it?" she asked softly. Stephen glanced at the poster still on his desk. "The Eyes Open Foundation, because the world needs to keep its eyes open, to see the people it overlooks." And so, they built it. Not in the polished way Stephen was used to, not with press kits and glossy brochures. They started small. Amara drafted the mission statement at her kitchen table, pen in hand, her mother listening from the couch. Stephen provided the seed money, but Amara set the direction. She insisted the foundation would be about action, not appearances. Food drives, mentorship programs, healthcare scholarships, emergency response training for schools. Their first event wasn't a gala. It wasn't even in Manhattan. It was a block party in the Bronx, held in the parking lot of a church, folding tables lined with donated meals, nurses offering free checkups, local kids painting murals on old brick walls. Amara stood at the front with a microphone, not in a gown, not on a stage, just in jeans and a t-shirt. "This isn't about saving anyone. This is about showing up, about seeing the people who've been here all along. Tonight, we start something, and it starts with us." The crowd cheered, not polite applause, real, messy, joyful cheers. Stephen stood to the side, watching. For once, he didn't want the spotlight. He wanted her to have it. Over time, the Eyes Open Foundation grew. Partnerships with schools, grants for single mothers, safe spaces for kids who needed somewhere to go after school. And everywhere Amara went, she made sure the message stayed clear. This isn't about me, it isn't about Stephen, it's about us, together, because no child should collapse on a sidewalk wondering if anyone will stop. The media noticed, of course. They covered the events, filmed the rallies, interviewed the kids. But for once, Amara didn't mind. Because this time, the story wasn't twisted. This time, the story couldn't be reduced to a headline. It was living, breathing proof that compassion could build something lasting. Stephen noticed something else too. The more Amara led, the more Ethan smiled. He volunteered at every event, handing out meals, running games for younger kids, telling anyone who would listen. "This is because of Amara. She stayed, so now we stay for others." One night, after a long day of meetings and planning, Amara and Stephen sat outside the community center they'd just opened. The paint was still fresh on the walls. Kids' laughter echoed inside. Amara leaned back, tired but proud. "Never thought I'd be here. Never thought I'd be part of something this big." Stephen nodded. "Neither did I." She looked at him, searching his face. "Why are you really doing this, Stephen?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I spent too many years building things that go up. Now I want to build something that lasts." The Eyes Open Foundation was born out of pain, prejudice, and one stormy night in Tribeca. But as it grew, as it touched more lives, it became something neither Amara nor Stephen expected. A reminder that even the coldest walls can crack. And when they do, light gets in. It didn't happen overnight. No one woke up one morning and decided, "We're a family now." Life didn't move that neatly. Instead, it came in moments small, almost forgettable, until they started to add up. The first came at the community center. Amara was sorting boxes of donated clothes when Ethan ran up, his hair sticking to his forehead from playing basketball outside. "You should have seen it, Amara. I scored on a kid twice my size." She smiled, brushing sweat off his cheek with a napkin. "Let me guess, you used that sneaky crossover you've been practicing?" He grinned. "You know it." Stephen watched from the doorway. He was supposed to be on a call. Instead, he stood there quietly, realizing how natural it all looked. How Ethan glowed around her. How her patience filled in spaces Stephen never knew were empty. The second moment came weeks later, at a late-night board meeting. Stephen was pacing, phone glued to his ear, barking numbers into the receiver. Stress lined his face. When he finally hung up, he found Amara sitting in the corner of his office, waiting with Ethan, who had fallen asleep on the couch. "He wanted to see you," she whispered. Stephen frowned, guilt prickling. "I told him I'd be late." He didn't care, he just wanted to wait anyway. For once, Stephen didn't know what to say. He walked over, pulled a blanket over his son, and looked back at Amara. "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Make him feel like he matters, like he's enough." She didn't answer right away, then softly, "Because he island, that's the only secret." There were awkward moments too. Times when people assumed things. Reporters who asked if Amara was the new Mrs. Caldwell. Donors who whispered behind champagne glasses, questioning her motives. But Amara never let the noise decide the truth. And Stephen never let the whispers change his respect for her. Because their bond wasn't about romance, at least not in the beginning. It wasn't about power either. It was about survival, trust, and something harder to name: connection. One evening, Ethan asked the question they'd both been avoiding. They were in the kitchen, Amara helping him with a school project while Stephen stirred pasta sauce at the stove. "Are we a family now?" Ethan asked, pencil hovering over his paper. The room froze. Stephen turned, sauce spoon in hand, searching for words. Amara's eyes widened, unsure how to answer. Finally, she knelt beside Ethan. "Family isn't about last names," she said gently. "It's about who shows up, who stays. If you feel like we're family, then maybe we are." Ethan nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring. Stephen caught Amara's eye, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. Their relationship grew in quiet ways. Stephen started showing up at the community center more often, not as a sponsor, but as a volunteer. He handed out meals, listened to stories, even played basketball once with Ethan and 3 kids, half his height, who still managed to beat him. Amara teased him about it for weeks. At the same time, Amara found herself leaning on Stephen too. When bills piled up for her mother's treatments, he offered to help. She refused money, but he found other ways: calling doctors, opening doors, making sure she never had to face the system alone. She realized something then. For all his wealth, Stephen wasn't offering charity. He was offering solidarity. And she accepted that. The city noticed too. Not in headlines this time, but in whispers of admiration. People who once doubted her began to respect her. People who once feared him began to see him differently. Not because they had changed roles, but because together, they revealed sides of each other no one expected. One night, after an event, Ethan tugged on Amara's hand. "You know what you are?" he said. "What's that?" she asked. "My better angel." Her throat tightened. She pulled him close, hugging him as if she could hold the words forever. Stephen stood nearby, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. "He's right," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "About what?" "About you." It wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. Not yet. It was something deeper, something sturdier. A bond forged in a storm, tested by lies, strengthened by truth. A bond that didn't need a label to be real. In the end, the story wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It wasn't even about scandal or redemption. It was about one decision. A choice made on a rainy night in Tribeca, when a young woman saw a child fall and refused to walk away. That moment carried forward. It spread across neighborhoods, across headlines, across lives. It cracked the walls around a billionaire's heart. It gave a boy a sense of belonging he had been searching for. And it reminded an entire community that compassion, simple, quiet compassion, still has the power to shift the ground we stand on. If there is a lesson in Amara's story, it is this. You don't need a stage to make an impact. You don't need the right last name, the right income, or the right connections. Sometimes, you just need to stop, to see, to stay. The world moves fast, too fast. People collapse every day on sidewalks, in classrooms, in invisible corners of our society. Most of us look away, tell ourselves it's not our problem, wait for someone else to step in. But what if we stopped waiting? What if we believed, like Amara did, that showing up is enough? Because the truth is, you never know who is watching. You never know who will remember. You never know how far a single act of presence will ripple. Stephen Caldwell once believed that strength came from control, from building walls high enough to never be hurt again. But in the end, his son didn't need a fortress. He needed a hand, a voice, a presence. And that presence didn't come from money. It came from a waitress with no reason to stay, except that her heart told her she should. That is the power of humanity. That is the power of compassion. That is the power each of us carries, if we choose to use it. Amara never wanted fame. She never wanted headlines. She wanted people to understand one thing. You don't need billions to save somebody. You don't need power to show up. Sometimes all you need is two hands, one steady voice, and the courage to stay when others walk away. And maybe that is the invitation for all of us. To stay. Stay present. Stay kind. Stay willing to see people as people, not as stories to be consumed. Because in the end, compassion doesn't cost. But indifference costs more than we can ever imagine. As this story closes, imagine yourself in Amara's place. The rain pouring down, a child on the ground, strangers walking past. Would you stop? Would you kneel? Would you stay? The world is full of those moments, waiting for someone to step into them. And maybe the question isn't whether they'll happen, it's whether you'll be the one to answer when they do. And so, as we leave Amara, Stephen, and Ethan behind, remember this. The world doesn't change because of headlines. It changes because of people who choose presence over comfort. It changes because of people like you. If this black story moved you, if it made you feel, if it reminded you that compassion is worth more than money or status, then don't let it end here. This is what we do at Hidden Worth. We bring you the stories the world overlooks, the stories that remind us who we are when everything else is stripped away. So stay with us. Subscribe to the channel. Share this story. Let it ripple further than it could, on its own. Because maybe, just maybe, the next life changed by compassion will be the one right in front of you.